Welcome in to the New Orleans Saints podcast, hosted by Erin Summers and John DeShazier. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers who cover the team on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your hosts, Erin Summers and John DeShazier.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. Huge game this weekend. Saints, Falcons in the Superdome, Week 18. It all comes down to this. Whoever wins with a Tampa Bay loss to Carolina will take the NFC South title. Saints definitely want to make sure they're the one that ends up on top, because not only is the division still at play, the Saints also have a shot at a wild card. Those games being played in the later block during the afternoon. So got to see what happens with the Saints-Falcons game first, and of course the Tampa Bay-Carolina game. With the stakes, the rivalry, who better to bring in to preview this game than former Falcons quarterback, current CBS NFL broadcaster Matt Ryan, and voice of the Falcons, Wes Durham. Both joined John DeShazier and myself to share their perspective of the rivalry and what they think the game will come down to. Let's kick it off with Matt Ryan. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. It's different having you on this side of things.
Yeah.
With so many years playing for the Falcons, now you're watching the rivalry from a different perspective. How has that been?
Yeah, it's strange. So it's the second game that I'll have called for the Saints, and the first time I was down here was early November against Chicago, and we came in to do the meetings with the players and watch practice. And one of the equipment guys showed me that they had kept my jersey on a tackling dummy that they take out to charity events and stuff like that kids get to tackle and beat up. And the jersey was well worn. So it was kind of funny, but it's amazing, right? Your whole career, you play in this rivalry, and then you come to the facilities. First time I had ever been to the practice facility, and I felt like a little bit, behind enemy lines. But the people are great, and you get to kind of meet the people in the building and spend time with them, and couldn't be nicer. And it's a unique rivalry in the NFL. Like going and doing this as a commentator this year, you see kind of different organizations and different rivalries and things like that. And it's really, it's as good as there is in our league. And it was fun to be a part of it as a player for a long time.
Great sport about the whole thing, as a matter of fact, because Matt Ryan, the former quarterback, took a picture with Matt Ryan, the Pelicans basketball player, and Matt Ryan, the Pelicans media relations director. But what has it been like to transition from one to the other? Because, at a certain point, I would imagine as a player, you start kind of ramping up emotionally for the game during the week, and now you don't necessarily have to do that, and yet you kind of do, because you've got the game to call on Sundays.
Yeah, it's the build-up's kind of similar, right? You do all of this work during the week, and then the ball kicks off, 12 o'clock Central Time, and you have no idea what's going to happen for 3 hours. And I always like that part of it as a player, right? Like you didn't know which situations were going to come up. You didn't know what you needed to be prepared for, but you had to do all these different things so that when it did come up, you were ready. And it's similar, calling games, in that you don't know which players are going to have big games. You don't know the storylines that are going to come up. You don't know the situations in a game that are going to come up, but you have to, you kind of have to be ready to improvise. And I thought the same was, true as a player. You prepare all week, and then you let it go, and you go play, or you go call it. And that part of it has been fun. It's different though. Like, I don't get nervous, sitting up in the booth, right? Like I'm not out there, I'm not getting hit, like I could just be wrong about what I said, and it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. It's a little different when you're out on the field, and there's all that action going on.
You participated in so many of these. What's unique that you found about this rivalry? Because we've heard collegial, we've heard basically two teams and cities that, I guess, to be nice, don't like each other. But what have you found to be unique about this rivalry?
The passion from the fan bases, right, is what you feel. I always felt it as a player, right? And you come in and immediately, they can't stand the Falcons, right? And it's the same feeling, when they would come to Atlanta. Like there was a lot of people that just can't stand the Saints. And so it feels it feels more collegey, than other rivalries that, in the NFC South. Like, if I'm being honest, we didn't really have a rivalry with the Bucks or the Panthers, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was, you played them and, they were in division, but it totally didn't feel the same. So it feels collegey because I think both cities are so passionate. I always thought it was crazy. Like, during my career, fantasy football kind of exploded. And so it probably was like my third or fourth year. I can't remember what year it was, but we were in New Orleans. We won. And I remember leaving, and it was different because somebody was yelling at me. They were like, getting on me or whatever. But thank you for like the 34 fantasy points. And I was like, it was a strange, I remember going to the bus specifically and hearing it and being like, man, I did not expect that being down here.
Yeah.
What has the feedback been like from Saints fans now that you're in the booth?
I mean, I haven't heard much, only doing the one game. So, I don't know. Hopefully it's okay. I feel like I'm fair.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what you come into it, and you try and be fair about what you think you're seeing and what you think they should be doing or shouldn't be doing, those kind of things. But I have so much, like, to me, you throw the rivalry out when you're doing this job, because I have so much respect for the players and coaches and all that they put into it, right? And I know, regardless of what building you're in, I know how invested players are, how invested coaches are, how much time they put into it, how difficult it is to go out there and perform. And I try and never, lose sight of that calling a game. It's really, I try and think from the player's perspective, this is what you're seeing right now, or this is what you're thinking right now, or this is what you're going through emotionally right now. I try and tap into that.
It's funny because I went to UNC and then I started covering the ACC. So I developed a respect for Duke after hating them.
Yeah.
And people, like my friends and stuff, were like, how could you ever like Duke? How could you ever say anything nice about them?
I know. It was crazy for me. So I came back from doing the game here, and I think I was playing golf or something during the week. Which is different, right? Like, as a player, you never played golf during the fall. But I was playing golf back in Atlanta, where I still live, and they were like, "Dude, what was it like? Did you like hate them down there, or what were the people in the building?" I was like, "To be honest with you, they were really nice. Like, I enjoyed everybody that I spent time with. Like, they couldn't have been nicer. It was really cool." So I'm with you on that. Like, it's a weird thing when you kind of go, you go behind the scenes a little bit and you see the day-to-day in a different building, and you're like, oh man, I really like what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
As a quarterback who's a guy who's going to the Hall of Fame, played a lot of great football, and Saints fans, he is going to the Hall of Fame. But is it difficult to critique quarterback play? Because you said, obviously you want to be fair, but this is a hot take business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm probably a bit of a quarterback apologist. If I'm critiquing my, first year of doing this, I just, to be honest, it's hard, right? It's hard to go out there and perform at that position, and you're dependent on so many different things, whether it's coaching, whether it's offensive line, whether it's receivers, running back, whatever. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts. And the reason you're successul, like the age-old adage that quarterbacks get too much blame and too much credit. And it's true. Both ends of it are true. But I try and view it from my perspective of how I would critique myself, if I'm out there. Would I say, that's a throw you got to make? If I feel like I look at it and I'm like, Matt, that was a throw you would have to make and you missed, that's what you have to say and you have to go with it. But I also try and shine a light on, what guys are looking at and how difficult it is sometimes to see things. And, of course, this is coming open, down the field, but let's take a look at what the pocket looked like. And he had to move to his left. It's hard to move to your left and throw back outside to your right. Like there's just a lot of different things that go on when you're playing. And I try and, shed a light on that when I can, but more often than not, I'll have the quarterback's back.
Yeah, and as well, you should. Did you know this was a business you wanted to enter?
No, I say it all the time. I really only wanted to do one thing growing up, and I was lucky to be able to do that for 15 years, right? And so the job or the career or the profession that that I always wanted to do, I was able to do. And the problem with playing quarterback is there's a shelf life on it, right?
Yeah.
You can't do it forever. And so, my time in Atlanta was so good, but my time in Indy was a rough patch. And so I think, finishing up that year, and I have young kids and kind of not wanting to move them around the country. We've got like a really good setup. To me, it was like, okay, at some point you got to make decisions that aren't about yourself. And so for me, that was a big part of the decision making. And then it was a nudge from my wife too, of like, listen, you're 38, there's a lot of life to live, and you're not going to be sitting around the house all day. And so you got to find something to do. And I kind of explored different opportunities in the broadcast spectrum, and was lucky enough to get this job offer from CBS. And I've been surprised at how much I've enjoyed doing it. I feel like I've gotten better, and our crew has gotten better as the year has gone on. But I love that I get to watch film. I love that I break down defenses. I love that I'm watching offenses and why they're working. Like, I love that part of it. The nerdy stuff, of playing is the stuff that I really enjoyed. And, I still get to do that. I don't think it'll ever replace playing and the feeling that you have when you're playing. But at the same time, life moves on, and you got to keep going.
And you don't get hit.
And correct. Unless I'm in this place and Cam Jordan lays me out before the game.
So we've talked about, I guess, everything except this game, I guess, which has some stakes to it. Maybe minimal for both teams, but some stakes. Both teams need to win. What are you seeing from both teams as they come into this game?
Well, honestly, I feel like it's two teams kind of heading in different directions. You look at, the Saints coming in, and it's been choppy throughout the year, but they've probably played their best football, at least offensively, this last 4 weeks, and they're 3-1. And then Atlanta comes in kind of from the other perspective. They've had the rotating door at the quarterback position most of the year. And I feel like for them, it's been a little more choppy, right? They have, kind of this stretch where they have a good win versus the Colts, and then come back and go to Chicago, and it was snowing and all that stuff, but certainly didn't play their best football. And so I feel like you've got teams that are kind of, in the same position, but have gotten there and arrive at this game in different ways. And so I think the place is going to be rocking, though. I mean, you guys know it. There's all kinds of crazy things that can happen in this league. So a loss for the Bucs to Carolina, that could easily happen. 2 losses in the 425 games for the Saints in the wild card picture. All of that stuff could happen. And so as a player, you work all year to hopefully, have your own path to the playoffs, but sometimes you don't get it. But you just want an opportunity. And for both of these teams, they have that. I expect it to be physical. I expect it to, be fun to watch, and we'll see how it shakes out.
I got to shut up after this one, but I got to say this. My brother-in-law, who's in Georgia, all my family's in Georgia, Macon, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So when I tell my brother-in-law I sat down for an interview with Matty Ice, he's going to go crazy. He's going to go crazy. Where did that nickname come from? Because it's one of the best nicknames ever.
Yeah, it was a good nickname. It started when I was in high school, and I was, for whatever reason, young. I played football, basketball, and baseball, and I guess was decent, but I played, like my freshman and sophomore year. And so these guys were like, oh, this young kid must have like ice in his veins or whatever. And there's a beer called Natty Ice.
Of course.
And it just worked, right? So they called me Matty, all of that stuff, and then it just turned into Matty Ice. And then I got to college, and nobody called me. And I had one of my high school buddies come up to visit, like at the end of my freshman year. He came up for the weekend or something, and all he called me was like Iceman. And so all of my college roommates were then like, dude, what is this? Why, like, it's pretty cool or whatever. One guy said it in the media in Boston, and 20 plus years later, people are still with it. It is, I mean, if you're going to get stuck with nicknames, there are a lot worse that you can get stuck with. Worse than that. It's a pretty good one.
I feel like that could have been an endorsement opportunity, like if NIL was the thing.
You've been crushing it at Boston College.
Like,
beer money. Talk about getting free beer money. It would have been so. Just give me the beer. It would have been okay.
I don't know if you want Natty Ice.
I don't know. It's funny. We were in Cincinnati calling a game this year, and we went out to dinner on a Friday night, and the people at this restaurant couldn't have been nicer. we kind of had our whole crew there, and we're finishing up, and they're like, we just have one last thing for you. And they brought out like this seafood tower dish with like, it had to have been like a dozen natty ices on ice. And like, we sat down, we had a couple it's the first time I had a natty ice in probably like 20 years. And I guess this isn't a good endorsement, but they weren't great. You know, hurting the neck. Yeah.
Yeah, when you broke in college.
Yeah.
You mentioned both of these teams coming in different directions. The Saints offensively have been improving. What have you liked about quarterback Derek Carr, the chemistry he seems like he's developing with some of our offensive weapons?
Yeah, I think, you know, it takes time, and people want, you know, it's hard when you come from a different place and you come in, you want it to be firing on all cylinders right away. And it's difficult to do that, you know, right from the start. I think you throw on top of that, he was banged up most of the year, right? And kind of dealing with injuries. And I think being healthy, or as healthy as he's probably been all year, helps. I think, you know, and we just talked to DA about this. Like, I think the pass protection has gotten better. They've been better up front, which helps, right? And then time on task with different guys. You look at Juwan and like where he's starting to develop. The last 3 or 4 weeks, he's been really productive. I don't think it's any surprise Derek's been at his best, because you start getting production from that tight end position group and what he can do. And, you know, I just think the comfort level, the health, the better protection, all of those things leads to, you know, better quarterback play. And listen, I know from the outside perspective, like the fan base here, it's been hit and miss, right? Like there's been some criticism, but there's certainly reason for optimism with the way the last 4 weeks have shaken out.
We talked to play-by-play voice Wes Durham earlier today, and he said he thought this was going to come down to turnovers and then having to establish the run game for the Falcons.
What a hot take from Wes.
I know, right? Like,
Wes is the best.
So what do you think?
Awesome. Well, listen, he's not wrong, right? Like the reason everybody says it all the time, turnovers, the turnover margin, it's the number one factor in terms of wins and losses, what determines wins and losses. I think, you know, if you look at what Derek Carr has done in the last 4 games, taking care of the football, I think it's 10 touchdowns and 2 picks in the last 4, 0 fumbles. Fumbles were the issue early in the season, right? Like turning the football over, not protecting it in the pocket, those kind of things. He's cleaned that up. He's been better. You look at the other side, you look at the Falcons and what they've done at the quarterback position, turnovers last week, whether it's Heineke or Desmond Ridder, both those guys have kind of turned the football over. I do think the turnover battle is number one. He's not wrong about rushing, right? Stopping the run has been an issue for the Saints all year. Atlanta does it, did it really well in the first matchup, 200 plus yards, whatever it's been, you know, and it's been an area that they struggle. But to me, I think these matchups always come down, particularly when you have, you know, a lot on the line. It comes down to where's the advantage at the quarterback position, right? And the continuity says, and the track record says, I feel like the Saints have the advantage in that department.
Who's the best Saint you've played against? You played against.
I mean, it's hard not to say Drew. Like, so if we take Drew Brees out of the conversation, but I was never on the field against Drew. You know, I never was out there at the same time. On the defensive side of the ball, I mean, it'd be hard to say anyone other than Cam in terms of the production that he had against us. So I'll throw those 2 guys out, right? Like, let me throw out Drew, let me throw out the obvious and Cam. I go back to early on, you know, Jonathan Vilma.
Wow.
They were good, right? And he was physical, and they had those guys in the back end. You know, like we had some really tough games, like physical games when they made their run in 09. I think it was 09.
Yeah, that was Jabari.
And so you talk about Roman Harper in the back end, physical player coming down. You know, Will Smith. I mean, I mean, R.I.P. But he was a problem for me early in my career, right? He was Cam before Cam arrived, and was a problem for us in Atlanta. So, I mean, there's so many good players that we went against for such a long time, but it's hard to pick, you know, kind of one of them.
Yeah, best Falcon teammate. I get, you know.
Man, another possible question.
Julio has got to be.
I mean, I was so lucky. Julio, an incredible teammate. Probably, I say this all the time, probably impacted my career more significantly than any other player that I played with. Just his level of production. I played with him for 10 I think it was 10 or 11 years. I think 10 years. So, the time that I played with him, I loved Roddy White. I mean, Roddy White he wasn't afraid of anybody.
He would tell you.
He would let you know. I love that as a teammate, right? I was lucky enough to play with Tony Gonzalez.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorites. But I'll go kind of an off-the-radar guy who's a Louisiana native in Todd McClure. He was my center. LSU guy. He was my center for my first 5 years in Atlanta. And Todd is one of my all-time favorite human beings and just, one of the best teammates you could ever play with.
Carr said that centers are kind of cranky.
Yeah, they can be. Todd was not. Todd, in all honesty, I think back to those early years in my career, Todd was one of the glue guys in our locker room who kept it all together. We had kind of some crazy offensive linemen, and Harvey Dahl and Tyson Clabo were two guys that were kind of like, they were off their rocker a little bit. They would do some extracurricular. They'd fight you after plays, all those kind of things. And they were always kind of on the edge. And Todd was the guy that would bring it all back together, or the guy that, like Roddy White, you said he would like to talk. He would get in.
Yeah.
He was a guy that could bring Roddy back, and he was one of the glue guys. And then I played with another great center in Alex Mack, who's in Atlanta with us for 5 years as well. And he was probably a little more cranky than Todd. He was, probably more with Derek.
Derek said it was more, I guess it was more training camp related, where those guys get, cranky. They're wearing the game pants and
they don't like wearing the snapping shorts. They want to come out, when you get like the Shells practice and they don't have to wear the pants. They're all pissed off that they have to come out in the snapping shorts. And you're like, dude, I'm not, you're sweating like crazy. I don't need you in regular gym shorts. Like I need to get the, QB Center exchange.
That makes a lot of sense. We appreciate the time so much. And just watch your back out there. Cam Jordan's around. Well, thank you.
Just appreciate it.
Great conversation with Matt. Now for a deeper dive into the game itself, here's Wes Durham. Wes, thank you so much for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. It is a big game this weekend. I mean, I feel like it's exactly like they planned it, to have the Saints playing the Falcons, still division hopes on the line for both teams. What is the feeling around the Falcons heading into this game?
Well, I think there's probably very similar to New Orleans, right? I mean, it feels like that a month ago, everybody started kind of drawing the conclusion that, hey, what if it comes down to Atlanta having to beat New Orleans, in the Superdome in the last game of the regular season to get to the postseason? And not only do both teams need to win the game Sunday in New Orleans, but they've also got to have what, I've jokingly called the miracle on Mint Street this week, which is the Carolina Panthers have to beat Tampa, which, to me seems a lot steeper hill to climb than the Saints and the Falcons game. But nonetheless, I think both teams are probably pretty frustrated with parts of their season. There are probably parts of their team they don't really like and wish they had a chance to go back and re-rack it. I think New Orleans and Atlanta feel a lot like that. But at the same time, the series is tied, 54 wins apiece. It's the 109th meeting. So, in some ways it seems pretty prophetic that it's got to come down to the winner of the game. And we'll put the underline here, having a chance to go to the playoffs if Carolina does pull off the win in Charlotte.
It's been a battle between these teams every time that they meet. Earlier this year, the Falcons getting that win, the Saints unable to get into the end zone. But how have you seen the Falcons change since that Week 12 game?
Well, it's interesting because you see where New Orleans has been able to roll off some wins, and Atlanta's been able to win some games. The head-scratching losses are the ones that probably, have put Atlanta in this position, Erin, more than anything else. I mean, when you look at New Orleans, who's won 3 of their last 4, they're 4-3 at home, but they've won their last 3 or 3 of the last 4 there. Atlanta split their last 6 and lost 3 of their last 4. And the 3 losses are Tampa, when you had basically your offensive and defensive line inactive for injuries and otherwise. And then you lose in Charlotte and you lose in Chicago last week. And the interesting part for me is the loss in Chicago last week is a head scratching loss in the light that, you can win that game. And not only did you not win, you didn't play particularly well in any facet of it. And so I think that now escalates the concern about where the team is on a whole, not just this last game. And so that's created the speculation piece behind that. And I think it's going to be really an afterpiece of the ball game on Sunday. And how Atlanta plays in that last game could dictate a lot of the things that, obviously are cataloged for the entire year.
Wes, you mentioned the parity, I guess, or the opportunity for either one of these teams to have a slim chance to get into the playoffs. And I guess, if you knew former, which I'm sure you do, former NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle, he's either above looking down or below looking up, one of the two, smiling because this is exactly what he wanted. But quarterback play seems to have been one of those things that's been a thorn for the Falcons this entire season. It's come on lately for the Saints, but how much has it hindered the Falcons?
Well, JD, it's easy to say for 14 years we were all spoiled, right? I mean, New Orleans could make the same case with number 9, right? I mean,
yes,
when Drew was slinging it and Matt Ryan was slinging it, we were living in high times. And at some point, those careers were going to come to an end one way or the other. And the way they came to an end was going to be how the succession worked. In Atlanta, it came, as the second phase of Arthur Smith's coaching career after year 1. And it's been a balky position, to be honest with you, the last 2 years. And I think New Orleans could probably subscribe to some of that, even with Derek Carr coming in this year. And I think that the quarterback play is kind of determined the success of the offense. And, to be honest with you, Christmas Eve, I thought Taylor Heineke played really well. Atlanta arguably played their best 60 minutes of football. And then last Sunday, that didn't happen. And it didn't happen in any of the 3 phases. And so I think quarterback does stir the drink. And in all honesty, I think it stirs the drink. You look at all the teams that are in contention here. Who are we kidding, right? They've all got really decent, above average quarterback play, some at a very high level. And I think those are the teams that we probably like to, advance deep into the playoffs. So I think the quarterback situation is a concern. I think it's been a concern all year. I think there's been some growth points for Desmond Ridder. It's been good to have Taylor Heineke, who is a backup in this league, who has started a number of games. But at the same time, too, there is no clear-cut plan after Sunday if Atlanta does not make the playoffs as to what the Falcons will do, either free agency-wise, draft-wise, to create any kind of stability in that position. And the answers to those questions will have to be fielded by Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith and the people involved who want to put that roster together. But I think the jury's going to be out, personally, on that position when we get to the offseason.
Now, on the other hand, the Falcons do have a great running game, 228 yards since the first time. So, we expect to see a whole bunch of that this time around. How much has the increased usage, I guess, lately of Bijan Robinson kind of played into that? Because I know first in the season he was being used sparingly and much criticism over that, but it seems like it's come on a little bit lately, especially since that Saints game.
Well, and it also feels like, too, that they had a plan from the start, right? You mentioned the usage rate early was slight, kind of picked up mid-year, and then here it's been pretty consistent. And thus he set a scrimmage yards record for rookie last week in Chicago. And I think that's a question, Sunday is going to be a lot about Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in the run game. Counter to that, though, JD, opponents have done a really good job taking that run game away because they know, and here's a stat going into last Sunday, where Atlanta was only averaging 134 yards passing in road games going into last Sunday in Chicago, and that number didn't get a lot better. And now, they come to New Orleans knowing that the Saints, while, 22nd in the league, I guess, against the run, New Orleans is more than capable of curtailing Robinson and Algier and making this a throw game. And Atlanta, number 2 is not back there anymore, right? So that part has got a completely different variable. But I think it will be interesting to see how Atlanta goes about getting to the run game Sunday in the Superdome for sure.
What do you make of the Falcons defense? Because that was a unit that pretty much won that first game, a couple of red zone forced turnovers, and they ended up, with a nice interception return. They, forced a fumble at their own 5. I mean, that unit pretty much won that first game.
Yeah, well, and that speaks to, and this is the part that's probably a little difficult for you guys because Ryan Nielsen and Terry Fontenot and all these, Caden Ellis, here's all the New Orleans people that are a part of this now, right? And it's been fun this week in Atlanta to talk to guys on radio about, and Erin knows what I mean by this, the collegiate feel to this rivalry is terrific. I love it. I think that the games are great. They're always entertaining. I mean, I'm talking to you guys, I'm flying to North Carolina, but I might as well be on planes going to New Orleans as many Falcons fans are at this airport right now. And it's crazy, because Falcon fans love the game just like Saints fans do. But the defense, to answer your question, JD, has got a lot of Ryan Nielsen's tutelage and flavor to it. And it's guys who have bought into his system and his style of play. And I think that's been the success this year. The remarkable turn of that defense is one that I think Atlanta fans see a lot of confidence in, and they really like what Ryan Nielsen's done. And I think that's a big part of what this team's going to be like going forward, to be honest.
We never saw it here, but has Caden Ellis yet had a bad day?
If he has, it's not been pronounced. He's had a year of 120 tackles. He's double-digit tackle for loss. He's had some sacks. He's forced turnovers. He's done all the things you want, but he's a big part of it. I would say too that David Onyemata, when healthy, he's been terrific here. He's almost 50 tackles, 4 sacks. He's been banged up, but here's the other thing about those two guys with the addition of Jesse Bates, JD, and Erin. Those guys are kind of like the hallmarks, and I would throw Calais Campbell in there too, right? Atlanta went and got intentional pieces to add to the defense because of the young guys that I think they knew would be mentored by them, right? I can't tell you the impact. I mean, it's impossible to tell you how important Jesse Bates has been impacting this defense, and especially the back end. I would say the same thing about Caden Ellis, because when Troy Anderson got hurt in Detroit, there was a lot of speculation about what, Atlanta would be at that linebacking spot. And Nate Landman has stepped in there, and I think part and parcel because of the leadership of Caden Ellis. And then Campbell and Onyemata, when Grady Jarrett went down, that was a huge concern that day in Nashville. And I would say that Onyemata and Calais Campbell are guys that have brought on younger players like LaCale London, a Zach Harrison. Eva KD's a rush end who plays a linebacker technically, but all those guys have benefited from the veteran presence, and I think that's kind of helped complete what this defensive renovation is going to be. And you see on Sunday you're going to start AJ Terrell, who's been to a Pro Bowl, but on the other side you're going to start a rookie from Utah who was taken in the 4th round, in Clark Phillips. And I think that kind of shows you how the maturation of this group has happened over the course of the year.
Defense has definitely come on for the Falcons. I think for the Saints, the offense has come on as the season's gone. They've been playing some of their best ball the past month. What do you think this game is going to come down to on Sunday?
Well, first of all, I think Atlanta has to win turnovers, just like they did in the first meeting. I don't know if you got to have the 92-yard pick six like Jesse Bates, but I think you're going to have to win the turnover game. The second thing is too, Erin, you can't, and I've said this a couple times during the course of a broadcast this fall, I don't think Atlanta can get into a game where they're going to throw it a lot. And throw it a lot, everybody looks for a number. And I can throw 25 or 30 attempts out there. But Atlanta's got to be able to run the football. And one way or the other, Tyler Algier or Bijan Robinson has got to spearhead that. I think that's really important. And you guys have seen the injury reports. So Taylor Heineke's status and how that impacts Desmond Ridder. And, Logan Woodside hadn't taken a snap this year. So, I'm not sure where that's going to go, but I think in the bigger picture, the way the game unfolds is going to be really dictated by how Atlanta has success against what I think will be a pretty geared up New Orleans defense for sure.
Mm-hmm. You've seen this matchup several times. How is it being in the Superdome as the opposing team, and not even that, like as the Falcons?
I think the players embrace this as different than a regular Sunday or Monday, or I guess in some cases Thursday in the NFL. I think the players really do embrace it. I think like I said earlier, I think it takes them back to a rivalry that is very collegiate in the way it feels. I mean, it feels like a college rivalry game. And the ones I've been fortunate to broadcast are the ones I was fortunate to attend early in my life as a fan. That's the way this game feels. I said it on radio in Atlanta earlier this week. Atlanta lost the game that night, the Katrina game, but that game is, that's one of the greatest events I've ever broadcast. And it was because of the motion, the momentum, and all the things that went into it. And I think the games that have been in Atlanta on like Monday night or Thursday night, the games that have been in New Orleans on Monday night. I remember when Sean Payton was going for the record against Mike Smith that night. That building was unbelievable. Same thing for Atlanta. fans love the game, and it translates to the players. I think it translates to the coaches, and it translates to the broadcasters. And I'm excited about Sunday. I think it'll be fun, and I think it'll be really interesting to see and we're fortunate in our line of work on Sunday. I think it'll be interesting to watch the temperament of the game change based on what happens in Charlotte. I think both teams want to win. We know that. But if that miracle occurs in Charlotte, what does that do to the texture of the ball game that we're watching? I think because good and well that's going to be that's going to be a piece of this that we weren't counting on 4 to 6 weeks ago, that now becomes a kind of a constitutional piece of the 60 minutes we're going to watch.
Yeah, we've been asking players here if they're going to be scoreboard watching because it's going to be up on the video boards. And they've said, well, the fans will let you know. They'll let you know how the game is going. Because, as you mentioned, it just feels different.
Yeah, but I also think this is the part where the Falcons announcer also has to say, well, the creativity of the New Orleans Saints entertainment program during the course of the game, albeit the video board or the way visiting bands line up or whatever the case may be, I'm sure that there'll be some element in the Superdome on Sunday that lets us know how the game is going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun one either way. Obviously, emotions are going to be high, a lot on the line for both sides. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, so am I. Thanks. I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You bet.
Appreciate Wes joining us. This one is a 12 o'clock kickoff on CBS. It's going to be intense. Tune in there, and don't forget to catch our pre- and post-game show on NewOrleansSaints.com. I really hope to see the Dome rocking this weekend. Tons of black and gold. Hopefully all the fans come out, enjoy it, and let's go Saints.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.